Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavors of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your technical questions answered, and contribute to the community forum. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our construction tech or weekly global Passive House showcase webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast. My sound all right?
It is. Yep. Sounds good.
Cool. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, coming to you from Auckland in New Zealand.
And I'm Zach Semke in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going, Zach?
It's going well. We are in fall and you are in spring, right?
Yeah.
And we are having one of those beautiful Seattle fall days it's crisp, and it rained last night, but it's sunny. It's beautiful.
Nice. Yeah, we're going into school holidays, and we've got some. It is quite a pleasant springtime, albeit that we are in a lockdown at the moment here in Auckland. But hopefully coming out of that soon, people are definitely getting out and enjoying the longer days and some warmer weather. So we'll keep trucking on. I think things they are improving.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. I'm thinking about you guys. Yeah.
Well, we've got a great interview to get into today. A guest who will probably be familiar with a lot of our listeners, because she's been involved with the Passive House Accelerator for quite a while and is a great part of the Passive House Accelerator family. But before we get into that, let's thank our sponsors.
Yes, let's do. So our founding sponsors are 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxter Ingwe Architects, Glavel Foam Glass Gravel, Minotaur All-in-One HVAC and Dehumidification Units, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, RDH Building Science, Rockwell North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. Our champion sponsors are Icon Windows and Doors and SIGA, and our stakeholder partner is NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. So big thank you to our sponsors for making the podcast possible.
Awesome. All right, let's talk about Shannon Pendleton. You want to give us a bit of an intro into Shannon?
Yes, absolutely. So Shannon is an architect and a certified Passive House consultant. She's the founder of Sanderson Sustainable Design, and she is co-host of the Passive House Accelerator Construction Tech. So many listeners probably feel like they know her well from watching those great construction tech episodes. She has been part of the Passive House community and green building community in the Mid-Atlantic for years, and helped. We'll hear the story about how she helped be part of the move toward bringing Living Building Challenge and LEED and Passive House together under the umbrella of an organization called Green Building United. And she is a smart and adept community builder as well. And we hear about her journey to Passive House and some great ideas about sharing information, sharing digital twins through a open source architecture network. So please enjoy this conversation with Shannon Pendleton. Well, welcome. I have Shannon Pendleton here with me from Sanderson Sustainable Design. She's the principal there. She's also co-host of Construction Tech, the Passive House Accelerator meeting that happens every Tuesday. And so I think lots of listeners are familiar with Shannon and her work and her great communication style. It's really great to have you here, Shannon. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you, Zach. And thanks to everybody for listening. Well, first, I just have to share an appreciation to everybody that I've come to know at the Accelerator, getting to know you and the vast community that's created there. It's really a living culture. It's a repository of knowledge, and it's a brilliant destination. I've never seen anything like it. I'm really proud and humbled to be a small part of it.
Yeah, I feel that way too. Thank you, Shannon. It's so great to have you part of it and such an important leader in the work that we're doing. So thank you. So why don't we start with hearing about your practice a little bit and your, the journey toward Passive House, and what has this been like for you? What's going on?
Oh gosh, that's such a long road at this point now. Yeah. Because, it's always a study and a practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as a practice, I feel like you really need to love it to do it well, especially residential design, which is where I really found myself after school. The opportunity, the ability, the choice to create something for someone else and not be faced with like the needs for personal survival.
Right.
And have someone else entrust their livelihood to you, their personal ideas, their habits. It's a big responsibility and it's a gift. So it's really fun to be invited into someone else's world. And I always like that about the Accelerator. I always like that about my practice. And as a study, I've always loved how architecture holistically blends different priorities, right? The natural, the physical, the social, the scientific, the historical, the spiritual. And yet it's starkly dichotomous. It asks architects to be specific and idealistic, creative and practical. And so, as my husband likes to say, you need to be up and out and you need to be down and in. So it's a lot like gardening for me, It's like dreaming while doing. And I think it takes a lot of faith in yourself and others to do it well.
Well said. So how has Passive House impacted that maybe balancing act or holistic, this left brain, right brain? What role? First of all, how were you introduced to Passive House in the first place?
Oh gosh, that's a wild story, right?
Yeah.
So the economic downturn that happened and kind of my lack of love in the actual practice part of architecture happened at the same time. That I learned that we had an issue with our water because of some dumping of fracking wastewater above our water supply.
Right.
And
you said
so,
this before.
yeah. So I was actually doing some activism around that and educating myself on what that was and what it meant, and trying to figure out how to fall back in love with my practice and really create sustainability as something I could prove, and rather than just talk about. Because at that time, that was the common refrain around sustainable architecture. You can't prove it. It always costs more. Mm-hmm. So I was bumping up against a lot of challenges there. And so no one in their right mind would do this if they weren't in love with it. So I really had to reinvigorate my love for it. And Passive House kept me there. So when I went into this activism and learned what Passive House was, I thought, oh my gosh, this is kind of answering all my questions. If I can get 90% of the way to zero energy and not need fossil fuels or renewables, like I need to know more about this. So I went to a training at MIT with Fias, and I met Katrin Klingenberg, who was just pivotal for me. She really challenged everyone from day one to reconsider what their thoughts were around energy use and personal choice. And she mentioned things like, you're going to rethink your trip on the escalator versus the stairs. And so it really appealed to me. And so once I got my certification and returned back to my practice, I had to find other people to share it with. And there was a really burgeoning group in Philadelphia at the time who wanted to form a passive house group. And like one of the first people that I knew that was involved was Tim McDonald, of course, because he was always a leader in the sustainability spectrum, and just a really practical, logical, but idealistic leader. And then Laura Blau was another person who was very vocal and kind of championing sustainability. And she organized a tour of New York passive house buildings with the Pennsylvania Community Development Corporation, which is an amazing force in Philadelphia as well. And we went on this passive house tour, and we came back and we formed a passive house group, which was ultimately voted to be led by David Solomon at Revision Architecture, who's
cool. All these,
a real luminary as well. And
this is great for me to learn learn this history. All these friends, and
so it's
please,
such
please
a
continue.
wonderful local community.
Yeah.
And the Delaware Valley Green Building Council arm was originally led by Janet Milkman, who was an amazing force, and then Alex Dews, who's now at the Institute for Market Transformation.
Right.
And he did a spectacular job filling her shoes and leading us all, and honored, what changed in the Green Building Council, the USGBC, the parent, and how Passive House and Living Building Challenge in Philadelphia were really growing, and were individual groups, and said, hey, we should all merge and form something else. And we all agreed, because it benefited everyone, to pool our resources and to have a louder voice, and to offer more to the community that was really hungry for more knowledge around sustainability. And so we formed Green Building United, and just continued putting on events, championing our heroes. And honestly, the biggest conference that they did yearly was, for our group, the New Gravity Housing Conference, which, the Accelerate really leveled us up into a more global audience this year. But Tim McDonald started that movement along with David Solomon in order to look at climate change as a new form of gravity, right? Because as builders and architects, we have to deal with gravity. We can't just choose not to. And so the New Gravity Housing Conference is putting climate change in that lens, that we have to deal with it. It's the new gravity. So that was really lucky to be part. I feel lucky to be a part of that, and take it to the next level for other people, and to really be engaged with the young people who find their way there, or where I point the way there too. And now at this point in my career, be able to be a mentor.
Yeah, right on. So tell me about your first passive house.
Oh my gosh, what another gift, right? So I've always had wonderful clients, because I grew up in this beautiful historic community focused on retrofits and reconstruction and passive house at the same time, and sustainability. And I have always had these wonderful clients, but sometimes they happen to be friends too. And a friend who grew up with my husband invited me to design a project for her, which is more of a poem than a project. It's on the founding site of her community where she grew up, and where I got to live for 6 years and bring our daughter up before I moved back to our family home. And it's on a site that is the founding site of her community. It was also the water source and so many other poetic things. But for her, the goal was to be sustainable and age in place there, and kind of think at least 20 years ahead, if not 100. And so we did that with the goal of Passive House, the guide of living building for sustainable non-toxic materials, and the idea that it really has to fit with the community and be able to be retrofitted and renovated over 20 years at first, to go from tenant to owner occupied, and then 100 years for it to become a really community stronghold, because that's what it was in its inception.
And in the process of thinking about and designing this project, have you found that it's changing the way you practice, the way, your approach to your work?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, I had to partner with another firm to do it because it was such a big undertaking. It wasn't just one house. It's multifamily. It was 2 residences, has a big event center planned in future. So I brought Revision Architecture in because I knew they had the experience and I admired them, and I got to work with David on the project very closely. And we brought in Ilka and Steve, who are well known to a lot of people at the Accelerator or in the Philadelphia movement. But if you don't know Ilka and Steve at Holz Room System, you should look them up. They're fantastic people to work with.
And Ilka is a frequent guest co-host with Mary James on the podcast as well. So listeners may remember Ilka through that association as well.
Yes, absolutely. I listen to almost every podcast she does because I love the guests that she brings in. Melanie Thomas is a personal favorite. But we brought them in because they had a solution for prefabricating the walls and getting the windows installed in those prefabricated walls with a carbon smart insulation option of wood fiber, which all of those things together allowed us to invite a local builder to do the construction and have the confidence that he wouldn't be burdened with so much air sealing around the windows. And we also had some really big window and door assemblies that were going to go in on site. So we figured the more penetrations in that beautiful, airtight, sustainable, resilient envelope, the better, right? Give our local builder who has never done Passive House a leg up. And give a lot of our team who had never done Passive House a leg up, And so the way it changed the practice and my approach to building is by learning what it takes to prefabricate. It changed so many things about what I considered to be my well-honed way of working, right? My workflow. I knew about IDP, integrated project delivery, integrated design. And I thought that I was prepared for it. But what I didn't realize was it was going to change the order of operations in design and also ramp up the soft costs and also require a level of detailing earlier in the project. I knew we were going to have the whole team early in the project to talk about design, price, options, specifications, as soon as schematic design and before. But the deeper levels and considerations for carbon and then also prefabrication really changed the workflow while we were working. And that wasn't just for me. I think that was for everyone on the team, everyone immediate to the team and everyone that was a consultant to the team. And so it demanded a lot of flexibility. But now what it demands of my practice, and I think of everyone's practice, and really our whole AEC community, is a new perspective on the opportunities that it offers. Because we prefabricated with Blueprint Robotics, right? They're a really big manufacturer. They have incredible machines and capabilities. They're right on the water. You can ship things from overseas at a lower carbon footprint than you can bring things in from the West Coast. It's really an interesting way to build, but to know that you have to design and build and think about every stud and the placement of every stud and not just do clash detection at a cursory level or build a 3D model at a symbolic level. You have to build a real digital twin, not a simulated digital twin. And that digital twin then has to be able to produce shop drawings for this fabrication warehouse. But then when you realize that those shop drawings, you could send them to Blueprint Robotics, but you could also send them to a CDC and they could have a warehouse and they could do this with hammers and saws. So you have an opportunity as a designer to think about workforce development in a way with your digital twin that you never did before, right? And then to think about how much energy and effort and cost it takes to assemble all this information, to have, I think we had 8 3D models by the end.
Wow.
And we had all these soft costs before construction documents, you know, and that's really where the burden of cost is in sustainable design now. And we're tunneling through the cost barrier in such a rapid way, and we're approaching prefabrication in such a rapid way that if we don't, as an AEC community, decide how we're going to manage that cost and capitalize on these opportunities now, I think we're going to see the prefabrication of carbon violating buildings at a rate previously unimagined. So I really think we need to use a sports analogy, do a full court press now, and capture all of this information and all of this product specification and all of this opportunity in the first 3 stages of design, because that's where all the carbon is, that's where all the cost is, and that's where all the benefits are.
Right. So there's a serious danger as well as a real opportunity here that you're describing. I'm also sensing a great segue.
Oh, good.
Because I know you've been thinking about this a lot and thinking about how to accelerate change and leverage the power of all this design and intellectual work and modeling to accelerate change. So tell me about the open architecture network concept that you've been thinking a lot about and
well, really studying.
What?
Right?
Yeah, great.
And
So,
I appreciate.
What is, first of all, what is
I'm thinking about this, but
what
we're
is
all
it?
thinking
Well,
about it.
Okay, fair enough. You're studying it, but you shared this concept with me. You were the first one to share it with me. So please, what is it? What is the Open Architecture Network? Why is it important? What does it do? How can we make it happen? Just a few questions.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me just get my magic wand and solve all these problems at once. Right?
Yeah. Thank you, Shannon. Appreciate it.
Yes, of course. My pleasure. But like I said, I think we're all thinking about this, right? How do we scale up?
Mm-hmm.
And as Prudence says, how do we retrofit, 6,000 to 9,000 projects every day in order to reach our 2030 and 2050 goals? That's Prudence Farah, who is one of my sheroes, along with Katrin Klingenberg and so many other women and men who have paved the way. But when you look at what retrofits and rehabilitation and renovation or even new construction are trying to do to scale up and meet those 2030, 2050 goals, the Realize project comes to mind, the Energy Sprung projects come to mind. And also AI, right? Technology, and how we're going to use AI to help us design and optimize our designs more quickly. And when you talk about that technology, it really takes me back to like the birth of the internet and how information was supposed to be free and how it's become this commercialized advertising behemoth that is really proprietary to the point where it controls the information that people get around the globe, and it's not free, and it costs a lot to be able to enjoy it, and then it takes a lot of education to understand if you're getting real information from it. And so that beautiful idea that information should be free, and the open source network for architecture or for programming, and the tools that are being used by architects and designers right now, like Grasshopper or Ladybug or Honeybee or those around GIS and mapping and carbon accounting even, are really interesting, right? Because if we look at other industries and how they need to be transparent in order to function, like the medical industry, they need HEPA, right? To anonymize information so they can use it, but also privatize that information so that everyone feels safe, right? And I think the AEC community really needs to find a mechanism like that for its information, because right now we've got this data-rich 3D universe, this real digital twin we can create, which, if you look at it like a phone, can be a vehicle for all the information that you can look at, like apps on a phone, right? That can just deliver and update themselves on not only the information we put into them, but the information they can give back about operational energy, about maintenance, you name it. It's really endless. And so if we take that analogy and we compare it to what the health industry is doing or the transportation industry in order to track carbon and health, right now we're taking all this data-rich information in these 3D models, and at project closeout, we're retiring them. They die.
Right.
And we go backwards into 2D and we print paper drawings and we deliver them to our local jurisdictions for building permits. And that's really a crime, because then our townships, they have this static, limited view of what actually occurred in this space for everyone's benefit. And if we could find a way to anonymize this and report on it by district, by city, by state, by country, by globe, we could really look at the opportunities of a real digital twin in a virtual world. And we could do what the transportation industry is doing. We could do what the medical industry is doing. And to do that, we have to form not only relationships where we get out of our own silos. And for those who don't know what I mean by AEC, it's architecture, engineering, and construction. We have silos within those categories, and we have silos across those categories. And we need to get out of those silos and invite other people into a much bigger silo. So the uncommon partnerships that the accelerator is creating between CDCs, community development corporations, or just members of the community, the grassroots movement, and others, those partnerships are happening in a really beautiful way where hard sciences and soft sciences are combining. And my favorite example of this is one Corinne O'Connell, who leads the Philadelphia Habitat for Humanity Shared, which is, she deals with not only the new construction of habitat housing, but also the retrofits for houses that are so unhealthy that people are endangered by their own home. And so her example is that a lot of the folks living in Philadelphia who can't afford healthcare, who can't afford to fix their homes, their children are sick and have a really high level of asthma, and they end up at CHOP, which is the Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania. And it's really the most famous children's hospital around. And they're using the emergency room there as an inhaler. Their kids are having really horrible attacks, and they're taking their kids in the emergency room. Mm-hmm. And the doctors are handing them a prescription to go to Habitat for Humanity.
Wow.
Because their homes are making them sick and they need to fix their homes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found a childhood friend of mine who went into a number of Ivy League schools and came out a really beautiful planner who does amazing work for Trenton right now, but other places where folks are challenged, like the folks in Philly are challenged. And she has hired a GIS mapper to map the homes with lead and mold problems, and is using HEPA to be able to do that. So these uncommon partnerships are happening, they're real, and we need to invite other people into our AEC tent. We need to share what we're doing with them, because retiring this information and allowing it to die is really a crime. And it's a waste of money, it's a waste of time.
Right.
Project closeout and our legal obligations to hold on to this information for 7 years when these buildings are going to live beyond us
Yeah.
and be part of our shared infrastructure and energy use as a society is a bigger responsibility we need to face.
And this open architecture network is partly a vision of a vast map. And this is something that would be voluntary for people to participate in, but this vast map of digital twin buildings with all the details, all the solutions around every single thermal bridge and other details it would have, the materials and the component details about what material was used and what component was used. It's taking that mine and wealth of information that you're creating during the design process and making it available to everyone. So it's revolutionary, and it's not just about what you're describing is both about breaking out of silos as well as transforming our understanding of our relationship to intellectual property. I mean, I think that's a big piece, right? And that's a cultural shift. Because I think that in the AAC community, we can traditionally, there's been a pretty conservative approach to intellectual property, but we're given the challenge that we face and the climate crisis and like you say, the responsibility that we have for moving decades forward to be able to share the details of these structures we're creating. It seems necessary. So what's the next step? How do we start making this a reality?
Oh, well, you can really Google that Open Architecture Network and Wikipedia that one and see that it's much more revolutionary than kind of the ideas that I'd like to see us use in the AEC community to break out. But it very much does address the intellectual property and even more so the proprietary nature of the software that we use and how we become pigeonholed into being trapped. We can't share models across disciplines sometimes because there's no export for their import or something that practical, right?
You can't, right. You
can't export there's no app for that. And so the idea that information should be free, and like when you look at Google Earth and how they've put 3D models on Google Earth, like that's our virtual world, right? And people voluntarily started putting their wonderful models on Google Earth. Look at the maker of Google Earth. He passed away in January. His name is escaping me right now, but you can Google that too. And he had the same concept, and that's really the concept of open source programming, open source software, and my argument is open source documentation, because architects are responsible for the health, safety, and welfare of the public, like a doctor. It's a profession. It is not a career. We have an obligation, and we need to push our industry to fulfill that obligation. So for what's next, I think really go to the accelerator and hang out with us, because I am not the only one who cares a great deal about this. I am one of many, many, many. And my favorite conversations right now are happening between the programmers who are trying to create these new softwares to be open source. And they're up and out, and they're down and in, and they're right there, and we can chat with them anytime. And that takes me to the FIAS conference that we're both going to go to.
Yes, thank
soon,
you. That's
right?
Yes. Let's talk about FIASCon. I can't wait to be in Terrytown and to take in this amazing conference and to see you again in person, Shannon.
Oh my gosh, in person! I know we've had this wonderful professional affair with each other and this entire community virtually,
Exactly.
And we got to meet once at the Passive House for All conference, which was fantastic. And now we get to do it again at the FIAS conference, which is just so near and dear to my heart. But I'm lucky enough to be presenting with a really incredibly engaging block of speakers. So there's this prefab construction block on Friday, which includes myself, Ilka Cassidy, Steve Hessler, Kyle Mocht. And then Tessa Bradley from Artisans Group, Graham Irwin, who's the principal of Essential Habitat Architecture, Katie Ackerley, Rusa Castle. I'm sure I'm missing a lot of people, Kurt Wenninger. They're all going to present. And we got to meet a little bit before we prepped and when we were submitting our slides. And Fias asked us, how do you want to do this speaker block? Do you guys want to do your presentation and do a Q&A? Or do you want to do a presentation and then do a joint Q&A with everybody in the block? And of course, we were like, well, can't we do both? Like, these are our choices. So we're going to do this wonderful Q&A after each presentation. And then we're going to do a little think tank at the end with everybody. And the funnest part of that is we are going to figure out that as we go. Like, we're going to have a little introductory session on the accelerator the Tuesday before the conference, which is the last night of the pre-con on construction tech, with my favorite people, our co-hosts, right? Sean St. Amour, Mark Willey, Kevin Brennan. I love you guys. And we're all going to hang out together, and everybody will do a little preview of what their prefab construction is going to be about. And then we're going to have that after hour that we always have, where we get to kind of mind meld and think together and challenge each other and push each other. But what you and I just learned, and what we're going to be thrilled to share with everyone, is that Katrina is going to come on and kind of kick us off, because she's the reason that the conference exists, and why our country gets to challenge itself in a way that that Passive House didn't know before her.
Definitely. Well, cool. That I'm looking forward to that, and I'm hoping that I won't still be in transit when the Tuesday piece happens. I think I will be on the ground. So very exciting. So I have a new question to ask. And this comes from a listener, Dr. Ana Campos Tevar, who's an architect in Spain, and she reached out to me and asking if we could pose the question: what are some key books in your practice, in your Passive House practice, or specifically, or your architectural practice more generally as it relates to Passive House? So do you have a key book that you want to share?
Well, thank you, Anna, for asking that question. What a great question. The original book that I fell in love with was given to me by my partner, who passed away about 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And the reason I went out on my own and started my own firm, he handed me the Mellor, Meigs, and Howe collection of works, which we referred to as the Design Bible, because it was all hand-drawn. It was absolutely beautiful. And it really inspired me to drive deeper into detailing and construction and really figure out sequencing and how things go together in a way that really carried that detail through to the first idea, that kind of up and out idea that we all have before we jump down and in. But a book that I bought and cannot wait to actually read is Doug Farr's book, because he does something that I think is so beautifully clever that architects have been doing for a long time, but that maybe the AEC community could use as it reinvents itself, which is, instead of breaking rules or needing to reinvent code, we can just name our problem something else. And in doing that, allow ourselves other opportunities. And my favorite example that he gave of that was when he wanted to do a park in the center of an intersection for a community that really wanted it. And they did it in a circular form, and it had a fountain, and it was a destination. And it's hard to think of the center of an intersection, like a traffic intersection, as a destination. But it is so beautiful. You could spend all day there. So the problem is it was a traffic circle, right? And the cars had to enter it, but stay in circumference of it and never occupy the center. And all the engineers, the traffic engineers, told him, you can't do that. You can't put a park in the middle. It's dangerous. People are going to get run over. And you can't put water there. People are going to drown, you know. And he said, okay, well, let's just not call it a traffic circle. Let's call it this instead. And they were like, oh, well, okay. and then, you know, naturally they found the case studies they needed to support their use of water, and the entire community is so much better for it.
Right.
They love it. It's like their prized destination.
The power of language.
Everybody goes there to socialize.
The power of language for paradigm shift. That's Doug Farr is just full of so many great, wise insights. Fantastic. Well, thank you. I hope that helps, Anna. We're looking forward to asking this question of future guests as well. So Shannon, thank you so much for this conversation. Is there anything else you want to add before we close up?
Yes. I don't know how to do it quickly, but I will try. I think that everyone needs to bring a friend, be a mentor. And if you're a young person, find a mentor, reinvigorate your love of what you do and your hope, because, you know, it's a challenge to face climate change and face the peril that our building industry can create on the environment. And it's not an excuse for not trying. And there's no point in feeling sorry for anyone or yourself. Get your get your belt and buckle up, put your suspenders on, and find a third way and join us.
All right. Well, a great interview, Zach. Thank you for organising that. And as I said at the outset, a lot of people will be familiar with Shannon, so it's really great to get a bit of her backstory. What were the big outtakes for you?
Well, I loved hearing about the community that has grown up around green building and Passive House in Philadelphia. These are, you know, we heard a lot of names at the beginning of the interview she was talking about, and they're all friends and colleagues, and so it was fun to hear a little bit of the history and how all these people are connected and how it all came together. So it was pretty good. How about you? What were your outtakes?
So right from the start, she mentioned a little bit about activism, and I get the sense that she was not satisfied with what she was doing. She felt like something was missing from her world of architecture, and she kind of sought out something, but she wasn't quite sure what it was. And I'm fascinated by that question you asked about, you know, how you come across Passive House, and it was kind of stumbling into that, and this thing that she found answered a lot of questions that she had, and just a lot of pieces fell together, like the ability to build a house that used up to 90% less energy, but was still really, really dry and comfortable, and could be an equitable solution. So it just answered so many questions for her at the right time, and I think that's fairly common for people who do come across Passive House. It just they just see that it's a really great solution for so many things that they're looking for, and it reinvigorates them and gives them a sense of pride. And she talked about that privilege of an architect, of being given the responsibility to work with someone and deliver something that's going to be life-changing for them. It's beyond just saving, you know, beyond the necessities, but just really giving them something that's going to change their life. So I found that quite inspiring. I always, because I'm not an architect, but when I hear people like that who are just loving what they do, I always kind of get this niggling feeling of maybe I should go and become an architect.
But then talk to an architect and you'll see.
Yeah,
what they say.
and see how hard they work. And
exactly.
Yeah, it's a passion for sure.
Yeah, I think that, you know, one of the things that really struck me related to what you just said, which is right on, is that she would also described being, no, I don't know, she didn't use the word disillusioned, but maybe that sustainable architecture was fuzzy, like it was hard to kind of put your finger on what do you do to make sustainable architecture? How do you prove that that's what you're doing? So I think for a lot of people around the time, and she also talked about this really was around the kind of the big economic downturn in 2008, 2009, that whole time. And there's so many origin stories around Passive House that revolve around that time. I mean, for me personally and many, many others that we've talked to. And at that time, I think it was like, well, I mean, we've got LEED and but there's a question about a little bit about the performance gap and what really is the right way to go about it, and how do we prove out that we're actually making a difference. And so Passive House comes along, and it's based on physics and metrics and measurable outcomes, and I think that really was a kind of career changer for Shannon, and it's great. Yeah, great to hear.
I think if I was just
and the role of Kat that Katrine played in that for Shannon personally was, I think, super important.
Yeah, and obviously, and other people that she mentioned, and like Ilka in there as well, that and just the whole community that has been a big part of. It continues to be part of that journey and inspiration. I think if I was to sum up a lot of what Shannon was talking about, it would be a change of the way that we do things. And she experienced that firsthand with working through a prefabrication project and acknowledging that didn't just change her product choices, but it changed the whole process of construction and design, and opened up different opportunities, like putting in the windows before they come to site, and just changing that whole process. But beyond that, there was a common thread there about sharing of information and changing the way we think about intellectual property and silos of architecture and engineering and construction, but even incorporating things like planners and the health sector. And it's inspiring to think about what might happen in a more open source type of environment where information is shared and also new information is created. And we've talked a little bit about the potential for artificial intelligence to just have a real shift, a paradigm shift in the way that things are designed to optimize the design process. There's huge opportunity there. So it's really great that people like Shannon are thinking about that and finding ways to make that happen.
And I was reminded, so I was having flashbacks during the conversation with Shannon to the conversation with Prudence Ferreira many months ago, and you mentioned AI, and that came up, and I mean, she talked a lot about AI, and Shannon pointed out that computer programmers are playing a really key role or have a really key role to play in helping overcome this silo problem, because these different softwares can't speak with one another. There's no like kind of universal way for them to transfer data across, and that there are a bunch of programmers who are, or at least some programmers who are on the case. It's another reminder that this effort of the transformation to clean, climate-wise buildings, to Passive House buildings, is gonna it means new players, and probably we could get some really smart young programmers that could make a really big impact in the work that we're all doing as an industry.
Absolutely. And I like that. I'm interested to find out more about the potential for digital twins. It's a relatively new concept, particularly in the residential space. I mean, I've heard of that being used in large infrastructure projects and certainly commercial buildings, but usually early on, maybe in the conceptual phase and the design phase. But I really like what Shannon was talking about, that we should be thinking of digital twins as having the same lifetime as the building and carrying on using them to help with maintenance and renovations and even testing different scenarios of what might happen with that building and how it might operate. There's a lot of scope there for thinking more intelligently about how we use some pretty cool design tools.
Good point. Good point. And when we think about the future of our buildings, where people are talking a lot about embodied carbon now, and thinking about it is, how do you not just sequester carbon during the lifetime of a building, but see that the materials that are going into buildings have a lifetime beyond the building? Seems like digital twins could play a digital twin could play a really important role, so that I don't know, 100 years down the road or whenever the building you go to think about deconstructing it, it'd be great to know how it's put together.
Yeah.
It's an interesting challenge to think about how to record and safeguard and maintain that information over the decades. But it's so interesting to think about just the wealth that is embodied by these models, and the wealth of knowledge and the value that they represent, and how currently that value just evaporates at the end of a project.
Yeah, and I think that sharing that data, sharing that information makes it more than like the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. If that information on a particular house was to be shared with an urban planner or the health sector, the potential gain from that could be exponentially larger, because it's unexplored to a degree at the moment. We just haven't really looked at what would happen if we kind of set that information free, and then play around with some GIS models and put some artificial intelligence in there. Now, that might freak out a few people in terms of privacy, and there are certainly some issues to solve around that. But I think the opportunity for doing some really amazing stuff, sharing information, not just within our own sector, but particularly talking about health, geospatial planning, and just a whole variety of other industries, I think could be massive.
Yeah, so true.
Anyway, back to reality for here and now. Great interview, and thank you to Shannon. And also, you had a listener question.
Oh, yeah. Do you like that? Yeah,
we want more
definitely.
Of
those. I have been kind of corresponding with Anna on LinkedIn and following up on it. So she's excited to hear that that I've asked the question for the first time. It'd be fun to do that in the future.
Absolutely.
Maybe next time I'd like to ask you what your key books are that.
Well, I definitely have a key one, but I'd also put that out there if people do have questions, or if they've got things that or suggestions for interviewees, then please do let us know. You can email us podcast@passivehouseaccelerator.com. We'd certainly love to hear from you with feedback or suggestions or questions about the show. It'd be awesome.
Indeed.
All right, let's hear about what's coming up.
Yeah, we've got a full slate at the Accelerator this week. On Construction Tech Tuesday, we are joined by Allison Bales. He is the Energy Vanguard. His business is called Energy Vanguard, and he's going to be talking about duct design for low static air handlers. So we're going to get geeky about HVAC in Passive House. If you're not familiar with Allison, he's a leading practitioner and luminary in North American kind of passive house engineering.
And author. Is he going to be talking about his book?
And author. That's right. He's I saw on social media that he just finished the last sentence of his book and now is in revisions. So it's getting
close. The house needs to breathe, right?
I believe so. That's right. That's his mantra, right? That'll drive him crazy. Okay, so on Wednesday, Thursday Down Under, we have the Global Passive House Showcase, and that's going to be featuring Sarah Bayer of Magnuson Architecture, and she is talking about a Buildings of Excellence winner. So NYSERDA has this competition called the Buildings of Excellence, and which also involves significant funding for kind of landmark high performance projects. And this project is called Rheingold Senior Residences. And she's going to be presenting about it. It's a really inspiring multifamily building in New York. And then on Thursday, we have a component spotlight, a passive house component spotlight with Rockwool North America, and they will be presenting about stone wool solutions for passive house. And they're going to be featuring projects like the tower at Cornell Tech in New York and other large buildings. So I can't wait for that. It's going to be Manaz Nikbak and Robert Blunt are going to be presenting on Thursday. So that's what's happening at the Accelerator. Real quick, we have big stuff happening in the community as well. So FIASCon is coming up, formerly known as the North American Passive House Conference. FIASCon is FIAS's landmark or signature annual conference. It'll be happening in person in Tarrytown, New York. It's actually going to be in person only. There's not going to be an online component. So I'm going to be there. A whole bunch of people from the Accelerator will be there. Really looking forward to it. I hope that listeners can join us at the conference and take in all of the great tracks that'll be there. That's October 12th through 15th. Northwest Green Building Slam Summit in the Pacific Northwest will be happening on October 13th through 15th. The 2021 Getting to Zero Forum is in New York, and that's going to be October 27th through 29th. That's a hybrid conference. And then November 25th through 27th, we have the South Pacific Passive House Conference.
Is that the lot? That's a big list.
I know, that's a lot. I promise we'll put in links so that people have links to
the takeaway. There is there's a lot going on. So get into it.
Yeah.
And some physical events too. That's exciting. In person, physical.
Yeah. Yeah. I am really excited to be traveling to Tarrytown, New York. I feel guilty saying it to you though, because I know that you guys
that's all right. We'll get there. We've got the Pacific, South Pacific Pacific House coming up in November.
Yeah.
It'll be all good.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Zach. Great for bringing us that interview. Really great to connect with Shannon. And I hope people are enjoying the bonus episodes that are coming out interspersed with these ones too. We've got some great little interviews that you caught up with some people just recently off the back of one of the other conferences.
Yeah, the International Passive House Conference. That's
awesome.
Right. Yeah, really, really fun conversations. A whole bunch of folks from Passive House Institute, and as well as other presenters that were at the conference.
And big shout out to a lot of our European friends that are being highlighted in those episodes too. It's great to hear from them. All right, that does it for this week. Thank you very much for listening in, and we'll be back again next week on